Now, Erie's premier podcast. News about music, health, and what's happening. It's Breakfast with Nat the Hat in the 814, sponsored by Erie Insurance.
Well, Podcast 27 is Battling Addiction, a community's collective struggle. Last month on Breakfast with Nat the Hat in the 814, we discussed this pressing issue that touches so many of us, and that is addiction. It's a challenge that doesn't discriminate. It affects individuals from all walks of life, regardless of your age, your gender, or your social status. And the response from that was overwhelming. So we realized that first and foremost, we must foster an environment of empathy and understanding, and that addiction is not a moral failing. Instead of judgment, battling addiction requires compassion and encouragement. And I've got two gentlemen on my show today that are very passionate and very encouraging. So here we are. I welcome Joe Tarcunio, administrator of the Maria House Project, Tyler Smila, local singer, songwriter, influenced by his 5-year recovery journey, advocate for change and growth. Welcome to the show, you two.
Thank you.
I am so happy that I finally get the opportunity to touch base with both of you. Transforming lives, one breath at a time. This is the mission of the Maria House Project, isn't it, Joe?
Yes, it is.
So let's start from the beginnings of that project.
Okay. Well, Maria House Project was started by a priest named Father Jim Peterson. He was a Monsignor, but he always wanted to be called Father. And he, at the time when he was alive, throughout Erie, he taught at Gannon. He started a number of programs, but one of his loves was Maria House Project, which is a ministry that serves men who are suffering from the effects of drug and alcohol abuse, homelessness. A number of guys have some mental health issues, and a number of our men have been incarcerated. So we are a healing community. And the big word in that is community, because we establish a brotherhood with the men that are there. But Father ran the it's 51 years old, and Father passed away about 11 years ago. I've been with the program for the last 25 years.
Let's go back, Joe, because I can remember you teaching a couple of my sisters in grade school at Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Yes.
So you were teaching. Mm-hmm. Now, you left Mount Carmel. Where did you go after that?
Father Jim Fahey called me up, and he was the executive director of Harbor Creek at the time, School for Boys. And he heard that I was looking for a teaching job, and he asked me if I would like to come with him. And I did, and I ended up actually teaching, becoming a counselor, and a lot of different positions there.
Sure.
Eventually, Father left, and I became the executive director of Harbor Creek Youth Services. But I was involved a lot in my church, and it just so happened that I did have contact with Father Peterson.
And you know, you did tell me before we started this podcast today that you actually were in seminary for like 7 years, correct?
Yeah, it was really freakish the way God works. I'm from the Greensburg Diocese, and that the parish I'm from is the same parish that Bishop Persico, who's in Erie right now, is from. I was the first seminarian there, and I happened to take the test to go into seminary. And lo and behold, there was 167 kids that took the test, and for some reason they picked me, and they sent me to Erie because St. Mark's Seminary opened up in 1959. So I was way far from Monessen, and there was no 79, so it took like 5 hours to get to Erie back then.
Sure.
And that's when I met the man who probably changed my life. It was Father Pete. And he was...
Was Father Pete over at Harbor Creek at all doing anything with them? How did you meet
Well, when I went
Pete?
to the seminary, I met Father Pete. I thought I had the best father in the world. Okay, a very calm man. He helped everyone, never swore, never drank or anything. And I thought, there's nobody else in the world like my dad. And then all of a sudden, I met Father Peterson. And I literally, for 6 years, he was my spiritual director, and he taught me many things. He taught me 4 things which I've lived my life, and this is part of Maria House. He taught me, first of all, that I was put on earth to serve other people, and then someday, when I need served, someone would be there for me. He taught me that I had to forgive, and if I didn't forgive, then my prayer life would be compromised. He also told me that I have to remember that every man and woman is a child of God, regardless of their good choices or bad choices. I must treat them as God's children. And the last one he taught me is learn to accept God's plan, his mission. And he says when you do, don't expect life to go smoothly, though. There'll be things that happen that you have to accept.
Right. When I think of Harbor Creek Youth Services, isn't Gannondale over there too?
Used to be.
Because, when we were growing up, and there's 7 girls and 1 boy in my family, and every time we drove by there or anybody got in trouble, my mother would always say, "You girls are headed to Gannondale. Do you see you're going to go right there?" I remember those.
Sure.
I don't want to go to Gannondale, Mom,
And many boys heard that. And you're going to go to Harbor Creek School for Boys, and then it became Harbor Creek Youth Services. So every time they screwed up, their parents would say, "That's where you're going to go."
So for 35 years, you're over at Harbor Creek.
Well, 31. I did 31 years.
Wow.
Yes.
And then?
Well, back in 1995, Father Peterson called me up. I had worked what they call metanoia at the Erie County Prison. It's like a cursil inside of a prison. And something happened to me that weekend where I didn't know it at the time, but God was pushing me towards something, and I didn't know what it was. And Father Pete called me up about 2 weeks later, and he said, "I was watching you. You seem very pensive." And I said, "You picked that up?" I said, "I haven't talked to anyone about it." And he said, "I would like you to go with me to Rockview Penitentiary. I would like you to see what I do." And I said, "Okay."
So he was at Rockview.
Yeah, well, he would go down there. Rockview is down by Penn State.
Yes.
And he said, "Would you give a talk to the lifers?" I said, "Father, I've never been inside of a prison. And lifers?" And he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "I want you to come down with me." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I walked down to Rockview. I went down to Rockview with him, and we started walking across the yard. And one of the things that the COs, the correctional officer, said, "Don't shake anyone's hand, don't hug them, don't do anything." I said, "Yes." And then Father was walking ahead of me, and it was like Palm Sunday. All of these inmates come out, and they're grabbing Father and shaking his hand and so on. And I was like just walking. I was like,
wow,
walking behind. No one
Right.
even knew I was there. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the yard, there's this beautiful chapel that was built by the inmates. And I went inside of it, and that's where they asked me to give the talk. And I there was probably about 160 lifers there. I was really intimidated. I didn't know how I was going to be accepted. And it went really, really well. But one thing happened to me that affected my life. This one gentleman came up to me afterwards, and he said, "I really wanted to tell you I appreciate what you did with coming down here from Erie." And I said, "Well, I came with Father." And he said, "I want to tell you why I'm here." And he said, I'm a murderer." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "All of us did something pretty horrible. People don't like us. We did bad things, and that's all right because they shouldn't like us. But we asked for forgiveness from God and so on." And he said, I've been here. I'm doing life. I've been here for 30-some years." And I said, "Wow." And he said, "But I went before the parole board, and they gave me a commutation." I said, "Well, if you got a commutation, why are you here?" And he said, "The governor, they said I could go, but the governor did not sign my release." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "There was a breakout at Western Penitentiary, and these guys were escaping. And so the governor refused to sign all the commutation." And the question I asked him affected my life. I said, how did you accept that? You've been down 35 years, 30-some years.
And you're getting that.
You're getting out.
Yes.
And then because
you're not.
one person's other of escaping, he wouldn't sign it. His answer to me was, it must be God's will that I'm supposed to be here. Maybe I'm supposed to help one of the other inmates. And I looked at him and I said, oh my gosh, I don't know. I would be meaner than cat piss, to be honest with you, if I knew that I was getting out and I was going to die in his place. So I was just moved by it. So as we drove back, I told Father Pete, I said, Father, if you want, I'll come down to Rockview with you on a regular basis. And he said, okay. So I kept going down. Then I'll end this story real quick. Ed told me, he said, I'm an artist. I said, really? This is the next time I went down.
Right.
He said, I just love Mother Teresa. And I says, oh, great. He said, I said, where did you learn to paint? The artist part of it. And he said, well, there was a guy that was doing 20 years and he left. And he said to me, do you want these paints? And I said, I don't know how to paint, but I got the rest of my life to paint. He said, so I did a portrait of Mother Teresa. And it just so happened that Mother Teresa's confessor came to Rockview. So I gave him the portrait of her. And I asked him, could you give this to Mother Teresa? And he said he would. He said about a month later, I got a postcard from Mother Teresa with a picture holding the portrait. And I said, wow, she wrote you a letter. He said, oh, she's written me about 13 letters. I said, the Mother Teresa? And he said, yeah. He says, he always says that, remember that God's love is unconditional. Regardless of whatever you do, the good choices or bad choices, he still loves you the same amount. So about 2 or 3 years later, he asked me if I do another portrait of Mother Teresa, would you put it in your office at Harbor Creek for the kids? And I said yes. I have that picture.
It's right here. Oh.
Now, he doesn't have any formal training, but you can see how beautiful
that is beautiful.
And he did it inside of his cell. He said, it's not very good because my lighting in my cell isn't good.
Look
And
at
I
her
look at
eyes.
that. Yes.
Looks like a photograph.
Yeah, it does.
It really does.
When he gave it to me, it just brought tears to my eyes. So, because of me meeting this Ed Silvis,
Yes.
in 2000, Father, we were driving down and he said to me, Joe, did you ever think about leaving Harbor Creek Youth Services? And I said, no. I said, it's my Camelot. I said, when I started there was 3 staff. I said, now there's 200. I said, we just got voted by the juvenile judges as #1 institution in the state of Pennsylvania, working with kids that have been victimized sexually. And I said, we had a union vote, and 87% of the staff voted no union. Why would I leave? And he looked at me and he said, because God wants you to leave Harbor Creek and come with Maria House. And I said, Father, I don't know anything about drugs. And I said, I've never taken a drug in my life. And I says, alcohol, I drink the bubbly once in a while, but I don't even get drunk. He said, oh, it doesn't matter. When God puts you somewhere, he gives you everything you need. And as we kept driving, he said to me, by the way, when you come with us.
like there was
what?
even a choice.
Yeah, he even said, you'll probably make half your salary and no benefits. And I said, are you trying to turn me on or off? He said, you know you can't say no to God. And then he shut up. So about 3 months later, I went through all this discernment. I ended up quitting, and he was right about the salary. But I've been there 25 years, and I've never regretted it. I have the best job in the world. I get to see miracles happen.
That's what?
Miracles.
Tell us about your residents and what you've done for them.
Well, the guys, when they come to us, I tell them it's a ministry. It's not a rehab, okay? We talk about the higher power, but most of the time we talk about God because we're a ministry, okay? So what we do is the 12 steps, but we incorporate Bible study twice a week, and we do centering prayer, which is more of a meditative type of thing. I don't want you to get the idea that guys are walking around with their hands folded. That's not what's happening. But they have to stay for 90 days. They have to make that commitment to me. My average guy stays at least 11 months. 2 reasons. One of them is it's the longest they've been clean and sober. But secondly, become aware of God's presence in their life. And that's what keeps them. I have guys that, it's a good problem. The guys don't want to leave. But I have 3 places. I have my orientation house, which is like a mini farm near Corey. I have one in Union City.
I've known of several gentlemen that have been down on the farm. Yes, they have.
And then we have right in Erie on West 10th Street. So I got 30 guys. And for me, that's enough. I'm 77 years old, so I couldn't take more. But we are a healing community centered around the Holy Spirit. So all of us are healing about something. I'm not healing from drugs or alcohol, but I have my own things to heal from. So the community helps each other, and that's why it works. We're very well known in Erie. Give you an example. On Erie Gives, there's 460 or nonprofits. The lowest Maria House has ever been is 15. Last year, we got $126,000 in 12 hours. That's
a community that cares.
Right. And what happens is there's a lot of men and women that have their son, their nephew, their uncle, whatever, and they've seen what has happened. And that's because my budget is only $300,000. So when you're getting $126,000, that's over 1/3 of your budget.
Tell us about what Father Pete had said to you.
Well,
about making budget and where's this money coming from. Tell us about Father Pete's final days.
Well, Father ended up getting lung cancer. And we had another house back then, and he lived in Harbor Creek with a bunch of guys. So I talked to my wife, and I said, I'm going to move in with Father Pete till he passes. I knew he was going to. And so I was sitting next to him in the bed every night, and the conversations I had were unbelievable. I'll remember them forever. I always worried that he was going to die while he was talking to me, and I figured I'd get hit in the head with an angel feather or something like that. But one time I was talking to him, and I joked with him, and I said, hey, Father, I got to go to bed. I said, some of us got to get up tomorrow and work. And he said, go to bed. So I went in bed, and I'm laying on the couch, and one of the guys always sat next to Father when I'm not there. And it was around 4 a.m. He said, Father wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I walked in and I said, what's wrong, Father? And he said, no, what's bothering you? And I said, I know you're going to the kingdom. I said, 80% or 85% of our budget is through donations. I said, and Father, you're the calling card. And once you're not here, I don't know how we're going to be able to afford
up with that money. Right.
And he said, what did I tell you when you first started? And I said, I know. You got an agreement with God. As long as we run the ministry, resources will come. And he said, well, I said, you got the agreement. I don't. And he said, you know what your problem is? And I said, I don't, but I think you're going to tell me. And he said, you don't trust. He said, you have to trust the Lord. It'll be okay. And so he died about 3 weeks later, and Maria House was ranked number 2 in Erie Gives. And now, like I said, the lowest we've ever been is number 15. And we're a small program in comparison to what we compete with.
Sure. I have Joe Tarcunio, the administrator of Maria House Project, on the show today. How about telling us some success stories of your mission?
Okay. There's an awful lot of them. But most of the time when a guy comes to us, they're broken, especially if I go to a prison. I go and interview them there, and I tell them what they're going to get into. I tell them about the Bible studies and so on, and I say, if this isn't your thing, that's all right. And there's other programs, and that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just that you'd have to go to Bible studies, and you're going to have to participate. You're going to go to AA meetings, and you're going to go to NA meetings. And we also take guys that have gambling problems, too. And most of them will say yes. Now, of course, all of them want to get out of prison, but I want them to know this isn't the reason I'm here is to get you out of prison. Do you want to really work in recovery? I've taken murderers. I've taken guys that have sold a lot of drugs and got busted. And then I take guys right off the street that are homeless, and I have contractors and lawyers. It's quite a conglomeration of men. My youngest right now is 23. My oldest guy is 86. So the average age is probably around 39 or 40. I'm just trying to think. This Ed that I told you about?
Yes. Ed
When I came to Father, when I finally started at Maria House, I told him things I would like to accomplish with him. And he said, that's a good idea. And then I said, one of the things I want to do is get Ed out of prison. He said, well, that's going to be very hard. I said, well, I like to set my goals high. Well, believe it or not, 3 years ago, Ed called me up from Rockview. I communicated with him, and he said that they are going to let me go before the Board of Pardons. I said, really? And he said, yeah, would you consider taking me? And I said, absolutely. And he said, would you write a letter to the Board of Pardons? Which I did. Who was in charge of that was Fetterman, and our governor was on that board. There was 5 of them. I got called from Harrisburg, and they said, we read your letter, and this was something very unusual. They let me be part of when they talked to Ed. So there was 5 of them, Ed and myself. They were Zooming it. And when Ed came in, Shapiro was pretty tough on him. He said that you killed someone's mother, could have been a grandmother, an aunt, and so on. And he was, he just hammered him. And Ed was breaking down. He was crying. He was reliving all of it. And I almost wanted to tell Shapiro, shut up. Then Shapiro said, okay, why are you here? And I said, well, when I met Ed, he had a big dramatic effect on my life, like I had mentioned. He said, but I said, what I was very impressed with was how remorseful he was and how he's kept his life together. And he said, stop. And then he said to Ed, I don't see any remorse. And I'm looking at Ed, and I could see him crying. And Ed couldn't even talk. And Shapiro asked him a question, and he couldn't answer. So Fetterman stopped, and he said, just a second, Ed. He said, exact words, I don't give a shit why you murdered that lady. I don't care if it was an accident. I don't care if it was premeditated or you were violent. We put you on trial 52 years ago. And you were found guilty. He said, I want to know, what have you done in the last 52 years, positively? He said, I see you got a accommodation, because there was a flood down at Penn State and you helped out. He said, yeah. He said, we got reports from all the COs because they have to. He said, we don't have any reports. How many times have you been in a hole? Now, to get in a hole, you just have to get someone mad at you. You're going in a hole, at least for 30 days or something. Mm-hmm. And he said, in 52 years, Mr. Fetterman, I've never been in a hole.
In the hole.
And Fetterman said to Shapiro, here's a man who's 83 now, and he said he's never been in a hole and never a bad report. Ed, we are a board of pardons. We're not here to retrial you. They had to vote, and I went home that day. I was really worried because I thought Shapiro was going to vote no, and you only have to have one no vote. Evidently, what he said to Shapiro changed his mind. So we ended up getting Ed here in Erie. I brought him up here. I took him to my house. Now, this is a man who's been in prison for 52 years. And my wife made him a nice meal. He ate this soup, and he said, this is the best soup I've ever had. And then we said to him, would you like to talk to a couple people that used to come to Rockview with us? Because we would go down and serenade the prisoners. And he said, yes. And my wife pulled out a cell phone, and our two friends lived in Florida right now. And she said, there's Sandy. And he looked and he could see Sandy. And Sandy started talking. He had never seen a cell phone. And all of a sudden he's talking.
Wow.
They both started bawling. Oh. And then the other lady did the same thing. He was unbelievable. And then my wife came out with a little cake saying, "Welcome home, Ed." He lost it. So I took him down to the lodge. And I said, "Listen, you're going to have a very small room, but you're going to have your own room, and you're going to be right off the chapel." And he said, "Okay." So I took him into his room, which was a small room. And I said, "I'm sorry it's so small." And he said, "This is my room?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You ever been in a cell?" He said, "This is bigger than my cell." He said, "What's that?" And I said, "That's a mattress." He says, "I've lived on a pad for 52 years. And he went over to the mattress and started bouncing up and down like a 12-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. He said, "This is mine?" I said, "Yeah, we're getting you a new one." I said, "I know it's you." "No, this is fine." And he kept bouncing. He was so happy and so grateful for everything. He got a little bit more than a year, and unfortunately he died, okay? But he died a free man. And imagine being that way for 52 years.
What a story, Joe.
Yeah, but he's not unusual. There's a lot of miracles going on. There's a song called "Great Things Happen When God Mixes with Us." I think that should be the theme for Maria House, because we mix these guys with God.
Yeah. Can someone volunteer? Do you have volunteers at the house?
Oh, yeah. Believe me, if I didn't have volunteers, I wouldn't have a program. I only have like 5 staff members.
Gotcha.
We work our tails off, but it's not work. Everyone has a sense of mission. We don't make much money, but we love what's going on. All of my staff are in recovery. I'm the only one that's not. But I always say I'm a recovering sinner. So, and I know everyone has that in common with me.
So you are the administrator, Maria House Project. You've been there 25 years. Any thoughts of retirement?
Actually, there is, and not only because I'm 77, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to have a stroke or something, and I'm very particular about who's going to take over my baby. Okay, it was Father's baby. When Father was dying, the 2 days before he died, I said to him, "Father, why'd you pick me?" And Father always joked with me, and he looked at me and he said, "Well, it's hard to get good help anymore, so you got to take what you get." And I laughed. And then later on, he just was quiet, and he looked at me and he said, "I didn't pick you. He did." And that was his answer. So right now, we do have someone who we just interviewed, and the guy has been coming. And so gradually, in the next year, I'm going to go into the woodwork. I'm not going to leave Maria House, but I'm not going to be the executive director.
Gotcha.
And the guy who's going to take over understands our guys. He's in the rooms himself, and he also knows a lot of our guys. How
can our listeners donate? Because, the give will be coming up again.
Yeah.
We definitely want you in the top 10, right?
I'd like to be in the top 10. Yeah, and just on Erie Gives, you could just click in Maria House Project and make your donation.
Any upcoming events you've got going on?
The next big thing is Erie Gives. However, people donate to us all the time.
And they can go right to the website to do that.
And they could get our address, which is on 19th Street now.
That's right. You've relocated. Yeah. Is it larger now?
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Good.
We have actually 2 bathrooms. Before, we would have to share the bathroom with the massage parlor. So it's a lot nicer now.
Joe Tarcunio on the show today from the Maria House Project. We also have Tyler Smilo. And Tyler is a local singer-songwriter on the show today. Tyler, thank you for joining Joe and I today, because you have a journey that we'd like to hear about, too. Have you always lived in the 814?
I was actually born in Longview, Texas.
Ah, okay.
So I was born in Longview, Texas. 2 teenage parents, very Christian households at the time, and I think there was some. I don't think I was very welcomed. In the 80s in Texas, that for a 17-year-old girl, unmarried, So I think that was a lot of weight on my parents' shoulders. And then by the time I was 2, my brother was about to be born, my father left. So we ended up moving to Youngstown, Ohio, and living with some grandparents. And I ended up living in Youngstown for a while, and then I went to high school in Coshocton, Ohio. And then I went to college in Pittsburgh, and I've been in Erie since 2012.
Tell me about college in Pittsburgh. What did you take up?
Well, real quick go back to my dad.
Sure.
My biological dad spent, I think, a total of 28 years in federal penitentiary in Texas from drug use and drug manufacturing. And I wasn't raised like that. I was raised in what I look back on, a fairly toxic relationship with my mother and her my adopted father. But I went to Art Institute of Pittsburgh for digital media design in 2005, and that's really kind of where my drug use took off.
Yeah. When did you come into Erie then? When did you?
2012.
2012.
I actually was sent to Erie. I was living with a girl in Venango County, and I was using, and this was 2010, 2011. Things hit the fan. I ended up going to jail for a while, and then I was relocated for the court system to Cadenzia, Erie, in 2012. So I did the Cadenzia, Erie inpatient, and then I did the Snow House 90-day program, and then I got an apartment, and I stayed clean for a little bit. I didn't have a spiritual foundation at the time. I wasn't working the 12 steps, and then eventually as you may know, that you will use. Mm-hmm. An addict will use. I wholeheartedly believe it is a spiritual condition. It's a thinking disease. And then I got clean again in 2018. But I've been in Erie since 2012.
So let's talk about your recovery.
Okay.
Let's, how your struggles with addiction started, it seems back in the day. And then where did this great deal of music become part of your life?
It's music has always been there for me. I didn't start playing until I was like 17 or 18, but I'm a very obsessive compulsive person, hence drug addiction. And anything I did, even as a child, that's all I cared about. I wasn't
over the top.
I skateboarded as a kid. I was drawing, in class, I was drawing pictures of skateboards, and I started smoking weed when I was 12. It's a pretty classic tale. I started smoking weed when I was 12. I started using other things, alcohol, through high school. And then when I moved to Pittsburgh, I was introduced to like cocaine and heroin. And I like what you said when you opened up the show about we're finding out that we need to address this with compassion. This isn't a moral quandary. Because it's very much so filling a spiritual void. It's very much so something is missing. And for me, when I was in high school, I looking back, I was a suicidal person. I was not thinking straight. I did not appreciate my parents at the time. I didn't really understand what gratitude meant, And when I used drugs for the first time, it was like I had found the answer. It really worked for me. It really, really worked for me. And I always had a guitar in my hand too. I'd be in the forest eating hallucinogenics and playing guitar for hours and hours and hours, and that was my God at the time. I had found the other side. I was living in a different dimension. People's worldly ideas. I mean, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, that was my thing.
Right.
And then with any addict, it will turn on you. Pretty soon, all you care about is the drugs. You don't care about the guitar. You don't care about waking up. You don't care about paying your bills. So I have been through several recovery programs, several Christian recovery programs, all sorts of things, but I was never really ready to turn my life around. But music had always been there, and I wrote songs all along the way. So I guess not to keep rambling, but
you go right ahead.
What I do now is kind of a merger of, I have all these songs. I love to play. I love to perform. I love to travel. I love to record. And now that I'm clean and I work the spiritual steps, and I have a higher power that I call God, I'm able, these worlds intersect now. And I wrote all these songs along the way.
Speaking of that, I was very excited to get your email the other day. And
sorry, I almost forgot about you.
I know. I had to email him back and say, you are going to join me on the show, right? Because, it was Taylor's Hope.
Yes.
The crew came in from Taylor's Hope, and they're like, they talked all about you. And I'm like, I've been looking for him. I have emailed him. I'm trying to find him. We
are here.
And, and I missed your very intimate show at the City Gallery. It was the Tale of Addiction and Recovery.
Oh, yeah.
We've done a couple of those performances. Now, I'd like you to tell me about, because you just said you just did these recordings a couple of weeks ago, and the new album is called Twang and Fire.
Yeah.
And there is definitely some twang going on, my friends. And I'd like to play The Shine. Can you give us kind of an idea of what you were thinking when you wrote this tune?
So I wrote, even to give you a little backstory, even in my darkest addiction, my darkest days, music was my hope. I knew there was different ways to live. I had seen people go through programs and get clean. I had seen people change. I knew that I could do it. I really did. And that's a big conflict when you can't stop, but it's possible. Because there's a lot of people that never leave that. And Shine, I talk about it. I said, keep me away from methamphetamine, please. And I talk about reaching out for God in that song, and it ends up sounding a little Irish and a little Celtic, and I have a full string band, so we touch on some bluegrass stuff. But I think lyrically and spiritually, I'm like, get me the heck out of here. I know I can do it.
Right, here is The Shine with Smilo and the Ghost.
Amphetamines, I've been flying now a little bit too long, and that ain't my style, just ain't seen hope in a while. She took my heart and she ran right out of town. Will I fly but where I go? So darling, don't you know, they say true troubadours, we don't come down. Will I spend up all my money, and now I'm acting funny, don't you know? I was calling for weeks, and she don't pick up that phone to tell me when she's home or if she goes. And when my love speaks, yeah, she always speaks in code, and I never even know just what we said. I've been feeling this for far too long, and that ain't my style, just ain't seen hope in a while. She took my heart and she ran right out of town. Will I fly but where I go? So darling, don't you know, they say true troubadours, we don't come down. Will I spend up all my money, and now I'm acting funny, don't you know? I was calling for weeks, and she don't pick up that phone to tell me when she's home or if she goes. And when my love speaks, yeah, she always speaks in code, and I never even know just what we said. Whoa, no, no. Whoa, no, no. Whoa, no, 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 no. Whoa, no, no. Whoa, no, no. Whoa, no, the century. This goes far beyond just you and me. And this ain't my style, just ain't seen hope in a while. She took my heart and she ran right out of town. Will I fly, but where I go? So darling, don't you know? They say true troubadours, we don't come down. Will I spend up on my money? And now I'm acting funny, don't you know? I was calling for weeks, and she don't pick up that phone to tell me when she's home or if she goes. And when my love speaks, yeah, she always speaks in code, and I never even know just what was said. Oh, Nana, oh, Nana, oh, Nana, Nana, oh, Nana, oh, Nana, oh, Nana,
The strings. I love it, Tyler. That's awesome. And you said that it's getting a lot of hits on Spotify right now. So if somebody wants to hear the whole album, is that up on Spotify?
Yeah, Smilo and the Ghost. Follow us on Spotify.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I heard you're up to like 6,000. That's huge.
Yeah, yeah. Just in the last few days, we've gone up like 6,000% on Spotify.
So Twang and Fire, how
Yeah.
did that come together? Like what was the, there's got to be something behind Twang and Fire, the name of the album itself.
well, so there is a track on the album called Twang and Fire.
Okay.
For this record, it was really, really cool. I've been writing and recording music since 2013, 14, and I've been a part of either solo or with bands. I think 13 releases. I just registered my 115th song with BMI. So I
Wow.
it's been an obsession,
Your beard should be gray at 115. That's all I'm going to say.
And
Joe, no offense.
and people told, I had a lot of pressure to not do it, and I had over the years and get a real job, and
Oh, I've heard that too.
and so it seems like now with the sobriety and the clean time and the music, and I'm finally getting decent at doing it. 115 times you get some practice, and finally it's starting to work out a little bit.
Good.
But the album Twang and Fire, that was actually, we have another song on the album called Hope and Hurt, and then we have another song on the album called Ghost and Goblins. Ghost and Goblins was kind of like what I wanted to name the record. And the guys are like, what is this, like a Halloween record? They're like, why don't we name it Twang and Fire? Because it's got some twang and lyrically it's got some fire. And so I thought that was a good call. Hope and Hurt, a little somber.
Yes. Well, let me tell you, a shout out to Gadenzia, because you talked about going through their
Yeah, I've been through there twice.
their program, and the first addiction podcast. I have a niece who has been surrounded by addiction, and she is a counselor there now. Yeah. And they listened to the first podcast, and then she said they cannot wait to hear you on the second podcast.
Amazing.
So yes, so they'll be turning us on the radio Sunday morning, or they will catch it on Spotify. And they are tuned in.
So I've actually had the privilege of going back as a speaker, being somebody who's been through their program twice, and now going back as a speaker.
What do you talk about, Tyler, when you go back and speak to others that are battling the demons?
Well, I remember very distinctly what it was like sitting there, and people, it seemed like a bunch of noise. Like when you're a true addict and you're really in it, and that's all you live and care about, you can't really hear the voice of reason. Like people, I wish my brother would get clean. He just doesn't listen. He can physically not hear you. He is a slave to addiction. I mean, you've probably seen it. Yeah. You cannot get out from there. So I try to start by saying, I know what it's like. I know that you.
I was shut off.
I
just
know
like
that you don't want to hear what I have to say. You don't.
Right.
I understand that. And this is my story. And it wasn't until that I took some suggestions and I did some step work and I got some sort of lack of self-awareness.
I always hear that they say that, idle hands are the devil's work. Do you think that, gentlemen?
I stay pretty busy. I can't stop.
And
How
I
about
always recommend the guys, but
Always involve yourself
Something.
in something.
Well, if
But you're right. I mean, there's that part when you are truly an addict that's all you're thinking about is where that next hit is coming from.
yeah, and especially getting clean. You want to stay involved. I still do meetings. I just launched a local NA meeting, a new one. I have sponsors, or I have a sponsor. I have sponsees. We actively work the 12 steps. I do the recovery music, and I also tour with Smile on the Ghost that's outside of recovery. And I'm writing and recording, and have a kid, and I work actually at Oliver's Rooftop Restaurant. I've been there since they launched. I go in the mornings and I make my sauces and my soups, So
Nice.
I stay there.
I've had a few of your sauces in your soups, my friend. They are delicious. I've only been up there once, but I have definitely.
So I started there over COVID when there was like no traveling, there was no music, and I just needed a job. And I love them, and they're all so supportive of the music. Like every time we do a big Erie show, everybody's trying to fill out the call off book, and there's an argument with who's going to get to go to the show, and so they've been great, and it's been a good kind of part-time thing while the music is kind of taken off. But
Tell me about your little
I have a 9-year-old son named Elliot.
Elliot.
And I met his mother at Cadenzia. They tell you, do not do that. Do not do that. Don't ever do that. Well, we did that. It's pretty big miracle because we struggled early on.
I'm sure.
She's clean today, and I'm clean today, and we co-parent the best. We're not together anymore, but we co-parent the best as possible. We get along. We don't fight, and he's awesome. He's a little musician too.
Cool.
He's a little drummer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Elliot, that's great. So, what do you think that we need to do here in the 814 to further change and open people's minds to, like, people always say, you can say no.
Yeah.
You can say no.
That effort didn't really work.
No.
you can say it.
Not
I
at
can't
all.
live it.
And it's like, it's not a disease. You can say no, but it changes people. And it's been all around me my entire life, so I know that. But what would you say what's our next step? What do you think we need to do to continue to help those in recovery and for people to get on with their lives sober?
Well, I think it's one of those things that it's one of those nasty parts of our society people don't want to look at until it's hitting them in the face. And now they want to be an advocate for change. And now they want to get out there and talk about it.
Right.
I've always been completely open and honest through my social media and through my concerts and my songs and stories and going back and speaking. I never remained anonymous. I have friends that are also in recovery, and I couldn't dare tell anybody. Like I'd lose my job.
Right.
And you know what? I can say wholeheartedly that I feel like it's helped me in the world to be open and to be vulnerable.
How many times? And I was telling friends of mine on the last podcast that we did on addiction, how nobody would come forward and put in an obituary that they were addicted to anything.
Yeah.
And how many, people that we lost through addiction, an entire generation, and nobody seemed to be forward enough to say, this is what's going on. But it's happening now, and you'll see that much more. Well, they lost their battle to addiction. Mm-hmm. And that to me is being able to say, because it's a lifelong recovery right?
Yeah.
It really is.
That's one of the big things. To
And
anybody.
people like to hide it. They don't want people to know that their son or their daughter or their niece or their nephew are users. You know, and you gotta come clean. You gotta come out and say, "Hey, this is what's going on." And how? I mean, this podcast and the last podcast, if I can save one person, we've done our job.
Yeah.
We have done our job. So there's a lot of social and economic factors. Do you believe there are certain factors that contribute to addiction, Tyler?
Oh, that's a tough question. I've known people that have been abused and sexually abused and neglected that become addicts. I've known people that were babied, had everything they could ever want, the most dream parents that became addicts. I know police officers that have become addicts, teachers, priests, pastors. I mean, it's like, I think that's one of the toughest things. It's like somebody wants to know who the villain is. We want to know, is it dad's fault? Is it mom's fault? Is it the school system's fault? I think it is very much a spiritual and thinking disease. And I think to answer your question, the most important thing we can do is to talk about it, not be ashamed about it, be open to help somebody and to understand that just because it's not happening to you, a lot of people are like, only trash people do that. That I don't think that's the case. And people need to be open-minded. And in recovery, we live by 3 indispensable spiritual principles, at least in Narcotics Anonymous, and that's willingness, open-mindedness, and honesty. And I know that that's the crazy thing about the 12 steps. It so aligns with the teachings of Christ.
Exactly.
So no matter who, and God can be a loaded word for some people, especially fresh off the streets. But when you look at it, I mean, there is a spiritual healing that's happening, and I think it could happen with the public too, and the people that aren't necessarily addicted to drugs, but everybody's affected one way or another at this point, I feel.
Oh, absolutely. Totally agree. Well, we got another one from Twang and Fire.
Okay.
Oh,
And this is called Already Dead. Talk to me about this song.
Whew. It's a heavy title, huh?
It is a heavy title. It really is a heavy title.
So, with the title being heavy, I do think it speaks a little bit to rebirth. Part of me that kind of passed on, and now a new person here, and just change. And the chorus says, "Don't you waver. We're going to keep the train going.
Great.
We're going to keep this going."
Let's do it.
Oh, mama, don't put your fears in my head. Try to save my life, but I'm already dead. And I know this deep in my soul. No matter where I go, I'll never be whole. And there's a darkness that we're all living in. I gotta find that light that shines within. Hell, I gotta find that light that shines within. In the rain, gonna wash away our tears. And that train must move on. Don't you waver, overcome your fears. I know you will, I know you will. I know you will, I know you will. Oh, I know you will. Oh, mom, don't put your fears in my head. Try to save my life, but I'm already dead. And I fight back from these consuming times. I lie awake most nights seeing all my crimes. And there's a darkness that we're all living in. I gotta find that light that shines within. Hell, I gotta find that light that shines within. In the rain, gonna wash away our tears. And that train must move on. Don't you waver, overcome your fears. I know you will, I know you will. I know you will, I know you will. Oh, I know you will. Oh, I know you will. Don't put your fears in my head. You try to save my life, but I'm already dead. And I fight back from these consuming times. I lie awake most nights in all my crimes. And there's a darkness that we're all living in. I gotta find that light that shines within. Hell, I gotta find that light that shines within. In the rain, gonna wash away our tears. And that train must move on. Don't you waver, overcome your fears. I know you will, I know you will. I know you will, I know you will.
Wow. Tyler, who is in the band? Who is picking these instruments? I need to know.
I'm playing all of it. No. So I'm singing and I'm writing guitar, playing guitar, and I'm writing songs and I'm singing. We have the world-renowned Jason Wilbur on the bass guitar. We were just talking. Well, that was playing. He toured with Bernard Allison and his blues band for years.
Nice.
Jason has traveled the world. We've come to the conclusion he's played every continent but Antarctica.
Wow.
He shared a lot of wisdom and a lot of arrangements on the strings. He's a great player. We got Mr. Adam McKillop on the mandolin and the harmonies. This guy teaches mandolin. He's a concert vocalist. He grew up in the church band. He can play and he can pick. He's a great dude. And then on banjo, we have my brother, Dominic DeCecco. He's also in recovery, and we've been a big part of each other's journey.
Sure.
You know, I think the playing and the traveling and the singing and the writing has been a huge influence of hope.
Yes.
Towards hope and why we're still clean and doing what we're doing. So I love him very much. I love all those guys.
Smilo and the Ghost. So
and
you need to get out
I gotta
and see
say,
them.
I gotta say, Dave Tamulonis.
Dave!
Dave Tamulonis played the fiddle on that record.
Very cool.
He doesn't always travel with us, but most of the times on the bigger regional shows, he'll be there.
I wish I could just go on and on and on, but I want to thank both of you, Joe Tarcunio from Maria House Project, Tyler Smilo. Can't wait to get out and see the band. You know, one of my favorite authors is Cahill Gibran, and I received his books from a mentally ill woman back in my overnight radio days many, many years ago, and I spent a great deal of time talking to her over the phone during the darkest of night. And here's a quote from that book. And he said, "Out of suffering has emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." Thank you both for being on the show. And everybody, make it a great week in the 814.
You've been tuned in to Breakfast with Nat the Hat in the 814, sponsored by Erie Insurance on 88.5 and 102.7 LECOM Radio.